Well, we are up against a deadline, the debt ceiling deadline, just a few days away. But is there a bigger story at play? How can the United States government sustain this level of deficit living? With us is one of the smartest minds that I know in the financial world. The brilliant Tom Wheelwright is not only my personal accountant, he is one of the smartest tax accountants in the world. And he is the owner of the Wealthability Network and the host of the Wealthability podcast. Natalie and I speak about it often here on the show. And we're so thrilled to have Mr. Tom Wheelwright in studio, in the flesh. So great to see you.
It is awesome to be here, Clayton. Just phenomenal.
It's really, really a treat. It's our treat. So really excited to be able to talk with you about a number of topics. But first, we wanted to talk to you about the debt ceiling. Of course, that's the thing that's on everyone's mind, which is the expansion of the ceiling. We're going to be able to print more money. And they're arguing that, of course, that they're actually going to lower spending. But that's not really going to happen at all, lowering spending. They're pretending that that's going to happen. So what does this mean for the future of the economy and the U.S. dollar, do you think?
Well, obviously, the more money you put in the economy, inflation is just more money chasing fewer goods. And, supply chain comes back on, we get more supply up and running. As long as they balance, it's okay. But what happens is that if the government keeps putting money into the economy and there's not a lot more production in the economy, that's when you have inflation.
Right. So not enough production. We have 1 million manufacturing jobs that are open right now in the United States. 1 million.
Yeah. The big issue right now is that we have a lot of people not working,
right,
that are capable of working. And we need them to work. So we actually have such a shortage of manpower, woman power, people power, that we don't have enough workers for the jobs that are open. And so it's very hard to increase production. Of course, hopefully technology will help solve some of that, particularly with the AI coming online. But it won't solve it quickly. So It will take some time. And during that time, that's when you see the inflation.
So it seems like lawmakers have a deal. But of course, it's not coming with any changes in behavior, as you mentioned. So we're going to continue to run up against this. So if we span this for 2 more years, we go 2 more years and then we're back to the same thing. And then we're $40 trillion in national debt? It doesn't seem like this is sustainable at all. I mean, when you look at the numbers, how's the government pulling this kind of revenue to cover these debts?
Well, they're not. They're not actually. So it really depends on the theory behind what I call magic money theory, right? This monetary policy is that as long as you can print money, you're fine if you can then tax people when the inflation gets too high. The problem that our government has is that they won't tax the right people. So taxing the rich actually reduces production, because that's where the investment comes from.
But I thought, as Elizabeth Warren says all the time, if we got to tax the rich, we got to take these billionaires down. Like that's how we improve the economy.
Okay, so if you want to slow inflation,
right,
the people that are going to slow the inflation are the consumers. Those aren't the multimillionaires. They're not the consumers. The consumers are the middle class. Okay, that's who you would have to tax if you really wanted to slow down inflation. That's why the Fed is raising interest rates, because they feel like, well, then, okay, if your credit card debt is higher,
right,
it's at a higher interest rate. If your home mortgage is at a higher interest rate, you will tend to spend less money. So it's an indirect, inflation is a tax on the poor and the middle class is really what it is.
Right. So the Fed seems to be moving inflation points based on sentiment. Is this actually working? Like what are they really moving these inflation points based on, do you think?
Here's the problem. Until they get the interest rate higher than the inflation rate, then it really doesn't work. Right. I mean, and they're not there yet.
Right.
So that's why I think there's a pretty good case for them increasing the interest rates again in June, because I just think that they think that, well, they're worried about the economy, but the reality is they've caused this economic catastrophe, right? First of all, the government put too much money in, both Republicans and the Democrats put way too much money into the economy, and then the Fed denied that there was actually any inflation, systemic inflation coming. And so they acted too late.
Right.
They just maintained those low interest rates too long. And so, now what we have is we have really systemic inflation, and the chances of it going out of control are actually pretty decent.
One of the things, of course, I'm most concerned about is our audience here, which is the consumers. And so they're seeing the price of everything going up, gasoline going up, eggs going up. We saw the egg crisis. So what does this do overall to consumers when you keep moving this goalpost like this?
Well, when you think about it, consumers only have a certain amount of money to spend, right? I mean, this is why this isn't a tax on the rich, because the rich they can spend as much money as they want. If gas goes to $10 a gallon, that's not going to affect a wealthy person's driving behavior. But if gas at $5 a gallon for gas, that means that middle class family has to allocate money differently.
Right.
So they either have to change behavior, they have to start taking public transportation, or they have to work from home, or they have to do things differently, so because they only have a limited amount of funds, or they have to promote inflation, which is I need a raise. And that just drives inflation up even more. You
talk to a lot of experts on your show, on the Wealthability podcast, and plus your clients too. You deal with a lot of really smart people and a lot of really wealthy people. We've heard Peter Schiff talking about that we are in a recession, and he thinks that we are in a great financial crisis. The media is totally ignoring the story. They're not calling it a financial crisis at all. They're totally ignoring this, and he thinks we actually could be worse than the Great Depression. First of all, do you think the media is doing a disservice? And also, do you think we are in a Great Depression or in a Great Recession?
Well, it depends on what you call depression. So if a depression means we're growing less all the time, it's not that we're actually in a depression. In other words, we're not losing money. In other words, there's not deflation, but rather that there's just not as much growth. Then there's no question we've been actually in a recession for quite a while, because our growth has been much lower than the target for several years now.
Right.
So this is not a new thing. This is something that's been going on. Jim Rickards calls it the New Great Depression, right?
Right.
And but if you look at it as purely, well, we have to actually have depressed prices, we're certainly not there yet. So I don't think it's a depression in the classic form,
right?
But certainly there's an argument for calling it that.
I'd be remiss if having you in the studio, I didn't get to ask you an IRS question and a Hunter Biden question. Now, you used to work in the Treasury.
No, I worked for Ernst & Young, and I was in the National Tax Office of Ernst & Young, which was in Washington, D.C.
In Washington.
So I had good friends in the Treasury Department. And, I testified on regulations and other things before the IRS and Treasury.
So, okay, glad I cleared that up. For some reason, I had a thought of memory of you, but you had a close relationship. You knew a lot of those guys. So, given the Hunter Biden IRS situation, where whistleblowers come forward on the IRS side, and they're pulled off of this investigation, which has been going on for years, what do you make of this? A number of these guys come forward and say, we've been pulled off, and is it political? Or is there something else at play here?
Sounds a lot like Lois Lerner, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It just does. It has the same feel to it, but the IRS has had that feel to me since the last commissioner. He was a tax attorney, the previous commissioner, and we were all very hopeful. And he like turned really fast. And we thought that he would, and what he did was he just said, well, all the people he had represented before, he just said, well, they're criminals. So the people he was representing now are criminals.
Wow.
And so that's why he started going after people, even though they were following the law, whether it be a conservation easement or captive insurance or some of these other things. They're generous provisions in the law. There's no question they're generous provisions. But they're in the law.
Right.
I mean, they're not loopholes.
Right.
These are in the law. And when you go after people for doing things that are in the law, and then you take people off an investigation that looks to be outside the law, then you have to wonder, is there political motivation? I mean, remember, Joe Biden was in the White House during the Lois Lerner days. So,
of course, yeah. Yeah, Lois Lerner, of course, who oversaw what the Cincinnati targeting of conservative groups in the IRS.
Right, anybody that had Patriot in the name of their 501c4.
Right.
They were slow rolled.
Unbelievable. I know you avoid getting into overly political in your Wealthability podcast, but we have seen the IRS become even more and more political. And then we hear this announcement about we're adding 80,000 IRS agents, and one of the caveats to that employment is that they will be armed, like armed IRS agents.
No. So let's be clear, okay? There are IRS agents and there are IRS auditors. IRS agents have been around ever since the beginning of the IRS. They are federal law enforcement officers. There's about 2,500 of them. And they're going to raise that to maybe 3,000.
Okay.
And they are the ones who carry guns.
They're the armed ones.
If you have an IRS agent come to your house, you did something really bad. I mean, like you didn't pay over your employees' payroll taxes for months and months and years.
Wow.
So these are the people who come to repossess your car. They come to repossess your house. You've done something really bad if an IRS agent shows up. What they're talking about is hiring a lot more IRS auditors. And so what they're doing is it's really interesting. They're taking all of the current IRS auditors and moving into supervisory roles. So they're just immediately getting a promotion. And then they're bringing in young, brand new IRS auditors that will be green. I mean, they're really brand new. And then they're bringing a bunch of lawyers. They're bringing a bunch of IRS lawyers. And a lot of that money is going to go to lawyers. And the reason is because here's how this is going to happen, Clayton, is that they're going to do what I call a checklist audit. And they will come in with a checklist and say, okay, I need this. I mean, I've handled a number of audits over the years, and they give you a information document request called an IDR, and it asks for pretty much the same things every time, right? Here's the typical thing. Well, they're going to come up with even more specific checklists. And if you don't meet that checklist, you're just going to be denied. Now, the concern is that they will not have enough experience. So they will not be able to make judgment calls. Without experience, you can't make judgment calls, right? You don't know how to make those judgment calls, or they won't have authority. And so what will likely happen is that you will just be denied. Well, then you'll say, well, then I'll go to the supervisor. Well, that's probably your best shot because the supervisor's got experience. Let's say the supervisor says no. Well, then you have to go to either appeals, which in many cases is a rubber stamp of the IRS, or you actually have to go to tax court, which can be like, I had an attorney tell me that to take a captive insurance case to tax court is going to run about $2 million.
Wow.
So what it means is you have an 800-pound gorilla who is able to sit on you. And you're going to have a lot of people, they already are now, that they're turning over their checkbooks because they can't afford to go to court. And the IRS just has basically an unlimited amount of funds. And when you give them another $80 billion, well, good news is this budget deal is taking away about $21 billion of that. And it's coming from enforcement. So that's good. It's not going to come from technology. It's not going to come from customer service. It looks like it's going to come from enforcement, which is good because $80 billion is probably too much. They need some. Yeah. Okay. They certainly need to upgrade their technology for sure. And I would hope that they would spend most of that money in technology because that's where the best enforcement comes from anyway, right? They check your 1099 against their copy of the 1099. They send you a notice. That's easy. Right. That's the kind of enforcement we should have. We shouldn't have full-fledged IRS audits. We shouldn't need them because technology should be able to handle that.
Well, there we go. Thank you for clearing that up. So it's not 80,000 armed IRS agents showing up at people's houses. Yeah. Well, of course, when you see the job postings and you see armed, you will be carrying a firearm.
Well, that was for the IRS agent. And, right. And that is a very limited position. There are very few of those.
They should have done a better job of explaining
They did
this.
A terrible job of that.
They need to hire somebody in their
very bad PR
department. Tom Wheelwright, great to see you. People should check out your podcast if they're interested in, the tagline of your podcast is?
The tagline broadcast is way more money and way less tax.
Way more money, way less tax. And he teaches you how to actually do that and navigate this crazy tax code. I highly recommend it. One of the smartest people I know. Tom, great to have you here in studio.
Thanks, Clayton. Great to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.